I am Jessie Ginsburg. I'm a speech-language pathologist, and I'm located in Los Angeles. I named my clinic Pediatric Therapy Playhouse very intentionally. I wanted it to be called something that parents could just say to their kids, "We're going to the Playhouse," and their kids would just light up and be so excited to come here. And I didn't want parents saying, "We're going to therapy," or something like that. So very intentionally called it the Playhouse. You know, that is what we do here. We play, and everything is done through play. And one of the biggest questions we get from parents is, what is speech therapy gonna look like? If their child's old enough, what should I tell them where we're going to? Which is such a valid question, you know? Being a parent, I could see how a family would want to describe to their child where they're gonna be going. And I say, tell them they're going to the Playhouse. Honestly, that's all we're gonna do. They're basically walking into a office that is filled with toys, looks like a toy store, and we're gonna be playing the whole time. So you could just say, yep, we're gonna go play. We're gonna go to the Playhouse. We are very, very intentional about goal writing in this clinic. For example, we tend not to write goals for following directions. We know that a lot of our autistic kids will score very low on comprehension, and it's not actually a reflection of their understanding. It's just that the testing environment sucks, and they're scared, and they're anxious, and we're asking them really weird questions and to point to weird things in books, and it's just not set up for them to do well. A lot of times we will write goals like, this child will follow two-step directions. And then again, it just sets us up for therapy that looks like us giving the kid directions the whole time. And that's not going to be fun for them. And it's not actually going to help them learn. So in our clinic, we write goals that are a lot broader. We write goals for things like, we'll communicate, whether that's through verbal speech, gestures, facial expressions, a device if they use one, and they will communicate for lots of reasons. They'll make requests, they'll comment, they'll greet, they'll protest. And a goal like that sets us up for success in therapy because it gives us so much flexibility in what our sessions can look like. When working with the autistic population, the main things that we will focus on is building regulation, engagement, and language. It was an article I wrote for our national association that impacted a lot of people because that was kind of the philosophy was we need to start with regulation, then we can build engagement, and then we can work on communication. And a lot of traditional speech therapy doesn't think about those things. A lot of traditional speech therapy is, this kid's not talking, I gotta teach him how to talk, I'm gonna put him in a table, I'm gonna have him label cards, I'm gonna, do things like that are a lot more structured. But what I have found is that when you bring a child into therapy and you focus on them being regulated, the foundation for everything else that we do with our bodies and our mind and our language, right? So we can build that regulation. And then when we focus on engagement, we focus on building a connection with children, the rest comes naturally. There's a lot of misconceptions about what engagement might look like specifically from an autistic child. A lot of therapists will have this idea, for example, we know a lot of autistic kids make less eye contact for lots of reasons. So a lot of therapists will say, I need this kid to make more eye contact because if they're not making eye contact, they're not engaged, which is not true. We don't have to be staring at someone in the eye in order to engage with them. That's really important to understand because if therapists are chasing after, that eye contact, they're gonna prioritize how to get eye contact above, is the child actually engaged? What we know about forcing eye contact on kids is that oftentimes it makes them so uncomfortable that it actually causes them to retreat into this fight or flight, which then makes them unable to really connect and engage back and forth in interaction. Knowing that the goal is not eye contact, the goal is engagement, the goal is participation, and how can we measure that a child is participating back and forth in an activity with us without necessarily using their eyes. When we have a child who's had too much of this compliance-based therapy, it completely hinders their learning and their ability to reach their potential, because ultimately working and using a reward system to work to 2 minutes on the iPad is not going to get a child to learn in the same way as sitting down on the floor and playing a game with them. There is a major difference between a child who's coming in and crying, not excited to come, versus a kid who is just running into the therapy room so excited to come in. And so many parents are just absolutely shocked, jaw on the floor type of surprise when they see their kid coming into a clinic where they're like so excited. They don't even care if their parent comes in or not, because they just run past the waiting room into the clinic. Not only is that better for a child's learning, but it's this sense of relief as well for a parent that lets them know that they're in the right place. There's just so much joy in getting to see parents have that feeling, especially when they've been in therapy for years and have not experienced that yet. When families come in for the first time, maybe to speech or after a new diagnosis, it's so overwhelming because it feels like you are at the base of a gigantic mountain. You know, I think it's important for therapists and parents to realize is that there's always the next stage of life, you know? So kids grow, their needs change. Our support for them might look different in a few years. I think it's a lot harder on us, meaning parents and professionals, when we think of like getting in and out of therapy, like this is the beginning and then here our goal is the end. You know, I think it's so much more about appreciating the small steps and the small wins that come in with it. And I just had a parent who she actually comes in every single week, and her kid has so much energy, just so much energy. And she comes in every week and she tells me something, and it's such a small win, but it's something that only parents who are in that situation would appreciate. She'll be like, we went to Target this weekend, the whole family, it's the first time. Or, you know, we went to a birthday party and we stayed for 45 minutes. A sign of you making progress is that you're on to the next problem, because there will always be a next problem to solve. And, you know, 4 or 5 years ago, barely anyone knew what neurodiversity affirming practices were. Now parents know what they are and they want those services, but they're struggling to find providers, right? And that's a problem. And then the next problem is, but the school systems aren't necessarily set up to provide neuro-affirming care. We have to understand that there's always going to be something next and appreciate the small wins along the way. I think that you don't realize that you feel like these clients are like your children. A few years ago, we did an exercise where we wrote the core values for our clinic, and one of them was like a melt your heart connection. We want the therapist to feel like they see that kid and they just love that kid. And I mean, I have kids where I'm just like, they come in, I pick them up, I'm like, okay, let's go home, you know, and I'm like serious, like I would take this kid home. And I've also had, you know, my own kids in therapy, and you can tell when a child has that kind of relationship with a therapist versus like when a teacher or something gets kind of annoyed with your kid. Like you can easily sense that. And that's really the key, I think, as being a parent who's had a child in therapy as well as a professional. But I think the key to a parent's heart is just like, does this therapist love my kid, accept my kid for who they are? And that really shines through and is a very important piece of the therapeutic relationship.